After spending 14 years on death row, Karla Faye Tucker was executed by lethal injection. But to understand how she ended up strapped to a gurney, we have to go back to a spring night in Houston, Texas. On June 13, 1983, in the early hours of the morning, the quiet inside a Houston apartment shattered forever. By sunrise, 2 people were dead, killed in one of the most brutal and infamous crimes Texas had ever seen. The woman at the center of it all was 23-year-old Karla Faye Tucker, who would later become the first woman executed in Texas in 135 years and one of the most talked about inmates in U.S. death penalty history, not just for what she did, but for who she became in the years that followed. But before we get to her final moments, let's go back to that morning in 1983, where everything began. It was still early on June 13th when Gregory Travers stood waiting for his friend, 27-year-old Jerry Lynn Dean, to pick him up for work. Jerry was never late, but this morning the minutes dragged on and there was no sign of him. With concern tightening in his chest, Gregory walked the short distance to Jerry's apartment, and when he arrived, he noticed that the front door was slightly opened. Cautious, he stepped inside, calling Jerry's name, but there was no answer. Gregory moved through the place until he reached the spare bedroom. There, he froze. Jerry lay stretched on the floor, with blood pooling beneath his head. Next to him was a young woman, motionless, a pickaxe buried deep in her chest. Gregory turned and ran for the phone, dialing 911 as fast as he could. When police arrived, the scene was brutal. Both Jerry and the woman, later identified as 32-year-old Deborah Thornton, had been hit and slashed again and again with the pickaxe. Deborah had argued with her husband the night before and had ended up spending the night at Jerry's place. She probably thought it was a safe spot to cool off, but that decision would cost her her life. When the police found them, the weapon was still stuck in Deborah's chest, and Jerry's prized motorcycle was gone. So was his El Camino, his wallet, and Deborah's purse. The TV and stereo had been pulled from their spots and stacked as if ready to be hauled away. But there were no signs of forced entry. Whoever had done this had walked right in and out. But how? The answer started 3 days earlier in a little brick house across town that barely held together under the chaos. For 3 days straight, the place shook with nonstop music, laughter, and bodies stumbling from one room to another. And Karla Faye was right in the middle of it. She had been staying there with 37-year-old Daniel Garrett, a man people in their circle called a pill doctor. He wasn't a doctor in any sense of the word, but he always had pills, and this time was no different. The party was supposed to be a birthday celebration for Karla Faye's older sister, Carrie Ann, but it didn't stay a birthday party for long. It spun out of control fast. What began as a simple binge grew into a 3-day marathon of drugs, booze, and anything else that could push limits. Clothes came off, boundaries disappeared. Carrie had wanted an orgy, and the people she invited were more than willing to give it to her. Everyone there, Danny, Karla Faye, Carrie, and James Jimmy Lee Brandt, was caught in the same spiral. Their lives were stripped down to nothing but drugs and booze, and this weekend was no different. There were bottles of beer, whiskey, and tequila, only to be swallowed down with handfuls of pills. It was a free-for-all buffet of destruction, and they devoured it like candy. On top of all this, I had been doing a considerable amount of and bathtub speed, Karla Faye later said. I didn't usually do speed much. Heroin and downers was my preference because I am a very hyper person, and doing speed always skitzed me out, made me go crazy. That night we were cooking speed, and we started shooting it because it was there, and I loved the in my arm, what one would call a needle freak. And while the hours blurred together, the talk kept circling back to Shawn Dean and her wrecked marriage. She showed up to the party bruised, with a broken nose and a split lip. Just a week earlier, she had finally walked out on Jerry Lynn Dean, her biker husband, after one hit too many. And this time, she swore it was over for good. And that wasn't all. On top of everything, Jerry owed Danny money for drugs. So, sometime after 2:30 a.m. on June 13th, Karla Faye, Danny, and Jimmy decided to head to Jerry's apartment. The plan seemed so simple. They would intimidate him, take whatever cash he supposedly owed, and steal his motorcycle, because according to them, there was no greater insult to a biker than to mess with his machine. Danny even brought a shotgun just in case Jerry didn't cooperate. Karla Faye had a key to his place, which she got from Sean after telling her the plan. Jimmy stayed in the car to watch for police while Karla Faye and Danny let themselves in and found Jerry asleep in the spare bedroom. Karla Faye climbed onto his chest and put the pickaxe to his head, then warned him not to move, or you're dead. But Jerry immediately tried to fight her off, grabbing at her arms. That's when Danny stepped in with a hammer and started swinging. Jerry begged for his life, but Karla Faye didn't stop. She brought the pickaxe down again and again, later telling her sister she smiled with every swing. But it was Danny who eventually delivered the final blow. And it could have ended there, but then Karla Faye noticed another person in the bed, a woman hiding under the covers. Deborah Thornton had been in the bed the entire time. A struggle broke out between the two women, and Danny tried to pull them apart, but Karla Faye wasn't finished. She grabbed the pickaxe again and hit Deborah over and over until the handle lodged deep in her chest. And again, it was Danny who delivered the final blow, driving the pickaxe into her throat and leaving it there. When Jimmy walked inside, the sound of gurgling filled the room. He saw Karla Faye with one foot planted on a body, yanking the pickaxe free, grinning before swinging it again. She finally got the axe out, got it up over her head, turned and looked at me and smiled, and hit the dude again. When he saw this, he immediately ran out the door. Jimmy wanted to have nothing to do with this. Afterward, Karla Faye and Danny loaded Jerry's motorcycle and parts into the El Camino, drove it to Doug's, and bragged about what they had done. Karla Faye laughed, saying, "Dan hit him with the hammer and I picked him. And, Doug, I come with every stroke of the pickaxe." By that, she later explained, she meant she had multiple orgasms during the attack. She then handed Doug the wallet they took, which he later threw away. That same day, they ditched the truck in a parking lot near the Astrodome, and a couple of days later, they pushed the motorcycle into the Brazos River, trying to cover their tracks. But Karla Faye didn't stop there. Later, she gave Deborah's wallet to her sister, Carrie, as some twisted birthday gift. But Carrie threw it away in disgust. And that night, when a news story about the murders aired on TV, Karla Faye and Danny laughed. They called themselves the Pickaxe Murderers, like it was some kind of joke. But Carrie wasn't laughing. She packed her bags that same night and moved in with her boyfriend, Danny's brother, Doug, afraid she might be next. For weeks, the investigation went nowhere. Detectives followed every lead, but nothing stuck. And while police were stalled, Karla Faye and Danny were already talking about killing Jimmy, the man who had been there the night of the murders, but ran the moment he saw what was happening inside the house. Then, 5 weeks after the attack, a break came, and it didn't come from evidence or forensics. It came from a man named Doug Garrett, a longtime friend of Houston homicide detective J.C. Mosier. Doug told J.C. that his brother Danny and Danny's girlfriend, Karla Faye, had bragged to him about killing Jerry and Deborah. And they hadn't been alone that night. Another friend, Jimmy, had been there with them. J.C. moved quickly after that phone call. Doug agreed to wear a wire and try to get information from either Karla Faye or Danny. And just a few days later, he met with them at their place on McKean Street. And it didn't take much to get them talking. They seemed proud of what they had done, bragging and laughing like it was a badge of honor. They went on for more than an hour, recounting every detail, details that had never been released to the public, and only the killers could know. And that was enough. That very same day, the police moved in, arresting Karla Faye, Danny, and Jimmy Lee Brandt. At the police station, officers started asking questions, trying to make sense of who they were dealing with. But Karla Faye Tucker's past wasn't something that could be summed up in a single sentence. They found that at the age of 10, Karla Faye learned that her birth hadn't been the product of her parents' love, but of an affair. And some think that's when everything began to fall apart. By 12, she was already deep into drugs and sex, and school became meaningless. And at 14, she walked away from it altogether. Her mother, Carolyn, had already carved out a wild life as a rock groupie, and Karla Faye followed her lead. They shared hotel rooms, band buses, and a life on the road, drifting from show to show with bands like the Allman Brothers, the Marshall Tucker Band, and the Eagles. Prostitution became part of their routine, and before long, she was immersed in Houston's biker scene, with nights of hard partying, dangerous company, and a blur of bad decisions. And it was there that she met Shawn Dean, a woman who would go on to marry Jerry Dean. And in 1981, Jerry and Shawn introduced Karla Faye to Daniel "Danny" Garrett. At the time, she was 21 and he was 35. The connection between them was instant, but it was toxic from the start, and it pushed Karla toward a path that would end in blood. By September 1983, the law finally caught up with them. Karla Faye and Danny were both indicted for murder and would face separate trials. Prosecutors charged Karla Faye with killing both Jerry Dean and Deborah Thornton. But after she testified against Danny in his trial, the charge for Deborah's death was quietly dropped. And strangely, Danny was never charged for Deborah's murder either. At her own trial, Karla Faye didn't hold back. She admitted, under oath, that with each swing of the pickaxe, she experienced a rush of sexual pleasure. It was a chilling detail, one that would haunt her trial and shape the public's image of her for years. She pleaded not guilty and waited for her trial in a cold, cramped jail cell. Those early nights behind bars dragged on, long, quiet, and restless. But one day, a prison ministry worker left a Bible in her cell. Out of boredom, or maybe curiosity, she opened it. The words made little sense at first, but she kept reading. And somewhere in those pages, something cracked open inside her. She later said she didn't even know what she was doing until she found herself on her knees in the middle of the floor, whispering to God for forgiveness. And by October 1983, Karla Faye claimed she had become a Christian. In late 1984, a jury sentenced her to death, something rarely handed down to women in Texas. Danny received the same punishment, but liver disease claimed him in 1993 before the state could. Karla Faye was sent to the Mountain View unit, where she ended up sharing a cell with another woman on death row, Pam Perillo, whose sentence would later be reduced. Years later, in 1995, Karla Faye even married her prison minister, Reverend Dana Lane Brown, through a proxy ceremony. It was a Christian wedding, simple but deeply symbolic for her. From 1984 to 1992, every attempt Karla Faye made for a retrial or an appeal failed. Then, on June 22nd, she made a desperate move. She asked the state to spare her life, arguing that she had been high on drugs the night of the murders. Without them, she insisted, the killings would never have happened. And that plea gained attention far beyond Texas. Letters poured in from Europe, religious organizations, and even political leaders. The Pope himself, John Paul II, asked for mercy. So did Italian Prime Minister Romano Prodi, U.S. House Speaker Newt Gingrich, televangelist Pat Robertson, and Ronald Carlson, the brother of Deborah Thornton, one of Karla's victims. Ronald had once supported the execution, but after finding faith, he changed his mind and publicly defended her. Even the warden at Huntsville Prison said Karla was a model inmate, and he truly believed she had changed after 14 years on death row. But on January 28, 1998, the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles rejected her appeal. Hours before her execution, Governor George W. Bush refused the last-minute request to stop it.
The courts, including the United States Supreme Court, have reviewed the legal issues in this case, and therefore I will not grant a 30-day stay. May God bless Karla Faye Tucker, and God bless her victims and their families.
In Texas, the governor couldn't grant clemency on their own. They could only follow the board's recommendation. And that recommendation never came. On February 3, 1998, Karla Faye Tucker was moved from the women's death row at the Mountain View unit in Gatesville to the Huntsville unit, where Texas carries out its executions. She had spent years there waiting, but now the final steps had begun.
I'm not afraid of dying. I mean, I know where I'm going. I know that Jesus has already gone to prepare a place for me. He's going to come and he's going to escort me personally. I believe that.
For her last meal, she asked for something simple: a banana, a peach, and a garden salad with ranch dressing. She chose 4 people to be present, including her sister, her husband, and Ronald Carlson, the brother of victim Deborah Thornton. When the guard strapped her to the gurney and asked if she had any last words, Karla didn't hesitate. "Yes, sir," she said. "I would like to say to all of you, the Thornton family and Jerry Dean's family, that I am so sorry. I hope God will give you peace with this." Then she turned her head to her loved ones. "Baby, I love you. Ron, give Peggy a hug for me. Everybody has been so good to me." She paused, then added, "I love all of you very much. I am going to be face to face with Jesus now. Warden Baggett, thank all of you so much. You have been so good to me. I love all of you very much. I will see you all when you get there. I will wait for you." Then the lethal injection process started, and 8 minutes later, at 6:45 p.m., she was pronounced dead. Karla Faye Tucker was 38 years old. What do you think? Has justice been served? Let us know your thoughts in the comments.